Hi, good morning all. And I am Ronni Myers. I want to thank everybody for braving the snow, for driving here or walking here or however you got here. But this is the wonders of modern technology, of the fact that we do have Zoom. And as Meryl had said early on, we did not have to cancel the program. I want to introduce myself again. I'm Ronni Myers. For those of you who do know me, and for those of you who don't, I am a senior human resources generalist business partner. I specialize in employee and labor relations. And before we start, I do want to do, as Meryl had used the word, housekeeping notes, but those are, for those of you who know, these are the HR folks who always say this. Please mute yourself. There will be no questions taken while the presenters are providing their stories to you. They are exciting stories. They're interesting stories. They have all walked a mile in your shoes. They have been in search mode. And yes, as the blast noted, they all landed during the pandemic, which is really exciting. They are going to share their story. They're going to share what it took. Some of them might have taken a shorter period of time, and some of them it took a while, but they got there. And I think that's really what we want to hear about, in as much as they also represent a cross of industries and roles. And so to that end, what I want to do is introduce our panelists. They are, and I did this alphabetically, so want to be fair to everybody. One is Dina Friedel, Michael Gogliormella, Blanton Neill, Ari Rubin, and Lamonda Williams. And with that, our first speaker is going to be Blanton Neill. Blanton, take it away.
Thanks so much, Ronni, and thank you, everyone. It's great to be here today. I was in job search mode for quite a while, and there is hope you can land. And I'm a risk management professional who worked for many years in the financial services industry. Most recently, I was at Deutsche Bank in their DWS asset management group, and I have moved to a financial industry self-regulator, which people in the financial industry may have heard of. It's called FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Association. It's a self-regulatory nonprofit. And I mention it up front because I stayed within my same industry, but pivoted a little bit. And so one tip is to kind of look broadly at the things that are out there. And in terms of the journey, I was laid off back in December of 2018, and I landed 20 months later in August of 2020. And this particular role, I started doing some informational interviews for, earlier in 2020, but really did all of the interviewing during the pandemic. And in terms of my journey, I'll give 3 tips that really helped me a lot in going through. And the first is to put health first, both physical and mental health, because I found this challenging and I needed to be in a healthy, good position to do that. So I exercised. And I also, when I was laid off, it was really a big blow. And I had a bout of depression for a little while. And there are such great resources available. Tap into them. There's a lot of stuff right now that's, very low cost, but that was something that really helped me, because this way I could be my best self and just, simple things, exercise, sleep, eat decently. But it was kind of like, if you've got your health, then you're positioned. And then the second thing I did was to have a framework. I would get up at the same time every day, start at the same day, and had some metrics. I had the good luck to be in an outplacement group, but it's things you can recreate for yourself. Of every week, I set a goal for how many in-person or Zoom meetings I would have, phone calls I would have, and a large networking event such as this one. And I set metrics for myself and then really pushed myself to meet them. Like, for me, phone calls are hard. I'm kind of shy. And I did it anyway. And that helped to have a framework, because there's ups and downs. And it was like a job. I told people I'm busy. I didn't do personal things, during the day unless I had to. And it gave me a good framework. And then I think also it made the transition to full-time work easier. I also did some consulting in my last several months. I had the opportunity to do some part-time consulting, which helped. And so I really was in earnest of my job search starting in October. And the biggest thing is really networking. This was how I got the job that I landed. And a lot of it's taking advantage of weak ties, letting people know what you're looking for. And then if you have some target places, building your network there. And how I did that was letting people know I was interested. I had a former colleague who had worked at FINRA, so I talked to him. He gave me a name. I kept asking if people knew someone, and sometimes it was very weak. Probably the most important connection I had was through someone I knew who had interviewed with FINRA, didn't get the job, but she said, you know, the woman I interviewed with was very nice. You know, I'm happy to see if she'll take 15 minutes to speak with you, which the woman didn't want to do, but she said, send your resume. So I sent that and a one-page summary that I had done. And lo and behold, I got asked to an interview several days later, and I had applied online for things. I had also, in mid-March, I had coffee with someone who was at FINRA and became a really good resource for me. She told me a lot about the culture, the positions, what to apply for. When I applied, I could show her as a referral, which made it better. And I met different people. And so when I got an interview, I could have people say, hey, look at this on the website. These are things to focus on or be prepared for. I had met people who knew the people I was interviewing with. And so they really helped me be focused. And then another thing I did was the night before the first interview, I went to a risk management networking group, which I wasn't sure if I was going to go to, and it turned out to be very helpful because there were some specific pieces of information that I was able to use in the interview and to show that I was current. And so that was the big thing. You know, the other thing is take advantages of resources to, you know, have people review your resumes, your cover letters, you know, update your LinkedIn profile, you know, to have it clean, because many people will look at that. And so it's really a multi-pronged approach. But for me, the networking, I had 7 people within the firm that I joined. And I think that really helped me get in. And now that I'm there, I'm staying in touch with them, which is very helpful. And so the bottom line is, if I can land in a pandemic, I started really looking in March. I had the first interview in May, and I started in August. It took time, but if I can do it in the pandemic, you can too. Because by the way, I'm also in my 60s, and so it is possible to get hired, you know, at all ages. So thanks so much.
Blanton, I have a question to ask you. If you had any regrets when you did something, or any lesson you learned from this search, what was it?
Yeah, I think, you know, the big thing was not applying late or without any internal guidance. I sometimes applied to positions that had been open for a while and where I didn't have any internal connection, and that for me was never got anywhere. I think I wouldn't have spent time on that. It's like, if there's a position open, get things so you get alerts immediately, apply for it, because, you know, they're getting a lot of resumes and you want to get in quick.
Okay, thank you, Blanton. Next up is Michael Gogliormella.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, so many people joining today. Ronnie, thank you for putting this together, and Meryl, thank you. The turnout is amazing. A little bit about me. So I was in financial services, or still am. I worked with AXA advisors for 20 years between Midtown Manhattan and Jersey City. And after about 20 years, you know, the company decided to move to North Carolina. Was asked to go, but family perspective, decided to stay in New York. You know, born and raised in New York. I don't think I'm leaving, but Florida is always a good option. And from there, you know, I knew about a year and a half before I was let go. So I had an ample runway, but I said, you know what, this will be pretty easy to get a job once this is over. I have a lot of connections, but I was in a little niche. It's operations of financial services, so back office. And after I started my search in July of 2019, I found it not to be as easy as I originally thought. So I had outplacement services, which is LHH. I know some people are on here, and that was a great. I know people call it a networking, but I call it a support group. And after that, plug to LTGIW, right? So I know everyone has a lot of networking groups they attend, and I think that was my biggest plus is meeting people. Learning how to write resumes, learning how to interview, just having people who are going through what you're going through on a daily basis. And I was able to go. It was available all the time, but one day a week we had a set schedule, and I was able to go in there. It was like going to work. I would get up and have that structure that Blanton mentioned before. So as I continue my journey, had several interviews, but I made it pretty far, and then ultimately you get the depressing, sorry, but you were good, but not good enough, or we went a different direction. And so get to about the new year, several jobs have closed down, wasn't able to land them, and I was getting a little bit, not to say depressed, but down. So I was looking through the internet, and while I was using a lot of networking, I also used LinkedIn a lot, and I feel that I told you who worked at that company, who was able to help, did I know anyone there, who was in that role. So I use LinkedIn daily, I would say, and I found a position at JP Morgan, and reached out to someone who I used to work with, actually who I hired at AXA, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and that person shepherded me through. Yes, I know the role, and it actually reports to someone who's just close by. So I had someone inside the company. So I don't have that luxury, but I mean, I interviewed for a job and got interviewed for a job where I had no internal connections, but definitely having one assisted. So I probably started that process at the end of February. Started interviewing, had one interview in person, was supposed to have another interview in person in the beginning of March, and they moved, JP Morgan went virtual, so I had 2 calls virtually, and then all of a sudden, as everyone knows, pandemic hits, and it's pretty, I would hit sporadically from them, and I would use any holiday or any type of reason to kind of connect with the recruiter. So I would send, Happy Mother's Day, and I just kind of fast forward. So we're in March, and hey, we're still interested, but we're not sure how to hire yet. Okay, we get to like Mother's Day, and well, Happy Mother's Day, and don't hear anything. And then finally got to June, and I got a call saying we're ready to make an offer. And even from there, it took until the end of July to start. So my journey took 13 months. I know some people have landed quicker, some people are still going, a year or 2 years in. But biggest thing is, make those connections, build your network, and try to pay it forward. So I appreciate all the people that have volunteered their time on these networking calls. And anytime I get asked, I'm happy to help because I understand what everyone's going through. And if I can help anybody, more than happy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. 2 things. First of all, if everybody's not muted, I'm seeing that also people have requested that in the chat box as well, but there is feedback coming back. But Michael, I have a couple questions to ask you. One is that knowing you had I know Michael, full disclosure, we happen to have been in the same job search work team together. So, we really did know one another. Knowing that you have a family, how did you remain positive and upbeat given you have young children and, daddy's not working?
I was supportive, out of the gate. I think my first day I was getting, I got a sign, hey, Daddy, you got this, you'll land. But I don't think they knew it was 13 months. But nonetheless, they were pretty supportive. My wife went back to work part-time, which helped out a lot. But a positive was, during the pandemic, my kids were home. So we didn't have to worry about childcare. I didn't have to worry about who's going to take care of them. So I was home. So I would have to split my day between looking for a job and taking care of the kids. So, having the family there helped from a support perspective. But I think just kind of, had severance, unemployment, however that process went, it definitely had its own challenges, but everything from anything that helped me get to like kind of the finish line and made me stronger at what I'm doing.
Okay. And just one other question, if you could like just speak a little louder. The other thing that I had was, did you put all your eggs in one basket for Chase? Or JP Morgan rather, sorry. Like, were you just focused on them once you were going through this process?
You broke up, sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Did I put all my eggs in one basket?
Well, once you were going through the process at JP Morgan, did you look for other roles?
I did look for other roles, but didn't really have anything remotely warm. So they were all my eggs were in one basket. You know, I would have continued to kind of, I think if I would have got a no, then I would have probably, really put my head down. But
Right.
I probably did a little bit, of putting my eggs in one basket, which is definitely not the message I would send to everybody. But I mean, it was difficult for me to get it. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't have a lot of interviews, with a lot of different companies. I know people have more interviews in a day than I've had, in a year. I had 7 interviews in one day, and I'm like, well, it's pretty amazing. I had 8 in, 6 months. So, I think it's
Excuse
just
me, 1 minute. This is Sharon. Can you talk louder? Because I'm getting a few people that are texting me. We can't hear you at all. So don't worry about your controls. Just you talk louder, if you don't mind, because you have some great information.
I'm sorry. I thought I was speaking loud, so I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yes, even louder would be good.
Okay, great. Sorry. So I think I'm not sure what people didn't hear, but maybe just to go back to Ronnie's question, she mentioned that I put all my eggs in one basket. And I sort of did, like not by choice, but there were a lot of interviews that I was getting, during the pandemic, but I still tried. I still tried networking. I still, looked at LinkedIn, networking groups. So, networking. So I definitely did all the things I should have done, but it was still hard to get interviews. But nonetheless, I did have a few, but JP Morgan was ultimately where I landed, and happy that I did.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Dina Friedel.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm putting my own timer on just to make sure, because I tend to, when I'm passionate about something, I will just keep talking. So my name's Dina Friedel, and thanks Ronnie and everyone in JVS, Sharon and Meryl, thanks for having all of us. So I've been looking for a full-time role since July of 2019, when I was laid off. So 6 months prior to March, which was already longer than I had expected it would take. Similar to Michael, like I thought, well, I'm so hireable and I know people, this should, not take that long. So I was doing a little bit of consulting, I think like Blanton also mentioned, but in March, all of that went away. So I'm an HR executive, and it was really interesting to see the uptick in open roles this spring as employees were being laid off and furloughed. FFCRA was passed, companies went all remote, essential workers were getting sick. So strong HR was more necessary than ever. So the number of roles I saw were multiplied, but it was still very competitive in the fields and at my level. So talking about, again, like Blanton mentioned, the mental health was very important, and taking care of myself, staying on a schedule, exercising, trying to sleep well, because looking for a job is a full-time job, and it's an emotional roller coaster. You're up, you're down. I would get an email, with a third interview with a company, and I think, oh my gosh, this is my next job, and I'd start future tripping, and then, the next week I'd get 3 rejections in one day. So the really taking care of yourself in whatever way is most important to you, and especially like maintaining some mental stability and emotional stability is really important. So some quick stats, I shared these with Ronnie. Over 12 months, I applied to 182 jobs. I interviewed with 48 companies, and many of them multiple times. Like I said, some days I received like 2 or 3 rejections in one day. Some of the things that I did that worked. I was very focused. So even though I applied for a lot of jobs, like I said, there was a lot of opportunity out there, but I didn't apply to just anything. I knew that I wanted to work for a female founded company, or at least a company with women at the executive level. I wanted to work with a mission driven organization around 100 or 150 employees who's looking for a company who was looking for like their first senior HR leader to help build the department, because that was sort of my niche. That being said, I was open. I did interview with some much larger companies, which was a great experience to learn about. But that was a little more informational for me because I really knew like where my sweet spot was. I started the search within my network, like a lot of people have and will continue to talk about. Events like this are so important, and connecting with people. And then I did start cold applying because there were just so many jobs. So I did, make sure, again, it was a company that really matched my criteria. I wrote very strong cover letters, and that's sort of, some people say I never read them in the HR world. I don't read them. They don't mean anything. For me and a lot of colleagues I know, it's a really good insight into how much time the person really spent and their connection to this role and the job. So from an HR perspective, I value a strong cover letter because I'll hear from someone who is saying, here's why I want to work for your company, and I know your values are this, or I'm a customer, or a fan of your brand, versus to whom it may concern. And the whole cover letter never mentions the company one time. So that's some good insight as well. So I wrote very strong cover letters. And like Michael was saying, LinkedIn was a great tool, reaching out to anyone I was connected to or second degree to that company. I started messaging founders directly, and that worked. Again, I was looking at much smaller companies, but I would message the founder, especially if we had a common connection, and just say, hey, I know you're probably not leading this search, but I wanted to bring my candidacy to your attention. And to wrap it up, I'll say on August 31st of this year, I started as head of people at Van Deer. It's a female-founded multi-brand retailer of athleisure. We focus on fitness and fashion. We have about 80 employees between our headquarters in New York and 6 retail stores across the country. So very quickly, some lessons I learned. You have to continue to take action and let go of the results. It's okay to feel disappointed. I cried a lot, but don't wallow in self-pity. Like, I would give myself a day, I'd cry, I'd feel disappointed, and then the next day I'm like, all right, back to the job search. And though it was hard at times, I learned not to take the rejection personally. And 2 more things, miracles do happen. Like, I was able to survive a year without full-time work. I had just made a big purchase and didn't have much of a savings account, but money came in at just the right time. The COVID, my unemployment had just run out in March, so it was extended 13 weeks, which with the extra $600 a week. I was able to put my student loan on forbearance. I was able to sublet my apartment. I babysat for friends. I worked part-time at a retail store. Like, I just did what I could. And the most important thing was to stay focused on being of service, because that really gave me a purpose. So, instead of being so 100% focused on the search, which I said is an up and down and roller coaster, that not everything in my life was focused around that. And I was really able to help people with their resumes and their own searches. And I think, Blanton mentioned this too. If I went to an interview and it didn't work out for me, I'd share it with someone else I knew who was searching, and we would, community was so important. We would support one another. So another reason why it's just so great to see so many people on this. So, that's my story, and I'm really grateful to have, been able to share it here with you, and hope that it was helpful to somebody.
Dina, let me ask you a question. I know that you changed industries. And so did that play a factor in you having to, you in terms of your job search, did you find doors were not readily open, even though we have transferable skills? Did you find that people had already put you in the box of what your former, industry was, even though you had come from name brands, and now you were looking at other organizations? So could you just give a brief note on how that worked for you?
100%. I've never worked in retail. My background was in hospitality, tech startups, and like creative events. But I did, yes, and people did say, "Oh, we're not looking for someone from hospitality." So what I actually started to do, what was most helpful, was I started asking, "What do you mean by that?" So, for example, at a lot of the tech startups, a common feedback I heard was, "We love you, you're great, but we really need someone from, tech startup." And I'd say, "Okay, what do you mean by that?" And it stumped a couple of people actually. And finally, I got some feedback that it's more top line revenue focused, not bottom line focused. A lot of these, startups are, funded, and it's really about growth, not about managing the bottom line. It was also about recruiting engineers, and the difference, again, in my field in HR, of recruiting engineers and tech people versus accounting, sales, marketing. So I did some research on that, and then I was able to come back proactively and say, "Hey, and I know you may be looking at my experience, but here's what I've done that translates into what your industry is looking for, or I understand this is what you're looking for, but A, B, and C, here's what I can bring."
Okay, great. Thank you. Then move on to Ari Rubin.
Sorry, just trying to get off of mute. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'll tell you that I'm very uncomfortable talking about myself, so that's something about me. I was working at Bed Bath & Beyond. Here's my story. Started there in 2014, working in workforce management, which was a change from really the rest of my career, where I was in financial operations and project-based roles. Prior to that, I worked at Sony Electronics for 15 years. So in the middle of June, on a Monday morning, I had a meeting on my calendar from a director who was not my line, and everyone in my group had it. I started getting pings from them saying, "What's this meeting about?" And quite frankly, I had no idea. About 10 minutes before the meeting, I got a call from the director and HR saying, "Giving a heads up, everyone who's going to be on this call is going to be told they're being let go today." And they asked me to stay on for a transition period till the end of August while things were being moved to an outsourcer. So the people who were let go, like on the spot, included my boss, the 13 people who I was responsible for. And it was a sad way to see that happen. Normally I'm not a worrier, but now I was going to get worried because I knew, at the end of August, I wanted to have some continuity, and let alone in any environment, not having a job is challenging, but the COVID environment, I think, brings a lot of more, you don't know what to make of it. And, my age, and I didn't know what else to think about. So I didn't take anything for granted. I didn't really hesitate or take time to start getting ready for a job search. I started updating my resume, updating LinkedIn. I reached out to all the people all my friends, and people who I maintained relationships with in the past from prior roles, prior jobs, just to say, I'm out there looking, please keep me in mind. And I started applying for roles. I wasn't particularly targeted. I kind of wanted to have no parameters around. I felt I'd be better off not establishing any boxes around me or any parameters around what type of company, what type of role, although I thought the healthcare industry was appealing. I also started working with JVS. I met with Meryl and Sharon, which was great, and they were very helpful through the process. And the thing I think you should know about me, I kind of said at the beginning, is not only don't I like to talk about myself, I am an extreme introvert. You take those tests, personality tests, I rank like 24 out of 25 on the introvert scale. So that's how I am. My friends call me the quiet guy, and they say I only speak when it's funny or if it's really important. So what happened? The good news is I had interviews and screenings, on a regular enough basis that I felt, at least there wasn't silence. Near the end of July, my director from Bed Bath had sent me a posting for a healthcare industry role, which I had actually seen, I think, the day before, and I'd sent it to my ex-director who had lost his job. And I just, again, I was trying to keep the lights on at Bed Bath while looking for a job. So I kind of put it off to the side. About a week later, I opened it up, I started looking at it, and I did the things that they kind of, the experts tell you to do. Go on LinkedIn, try and see if you know anyone or could find anyone who's either working there or connected with someone who's working there, as that, could facilitate trying to, at least get in front of somebody. So I came across someone who was at Bed Bath earlier in the year, and she was let go. I tried to connect with her. And then as I looked a little further, I came across the name of someone who I thought I knew from across town. I think I coached his son 10 or 12 years ago in basketball. So I sent him a message on LinkedIn, kind of introducing myself and asking if he had 5 minutes to chat. I was eyeballing this role, and he was really great about it. We responded pretty quickly. We got on the phone, had a good conversation, and he was happy to take my resume and pass it along to the hiring manager who he knew. So pass it along. Later that day, he called me back or messaged me back saying the hiring manager is really interested. Go and apply online. I went in as a referral from him, and then okay, great, sounds good. And then I'm kind of waiting. I didn't hear from anyone for about a week, and I wasn't sure what to make from it. Then HR called me, had the HR screening, went okay. One of the things I had noticed while I was researching the company was one of their core values is doing the right thing even when no one is looking. And quite frankly, that's part of my pitch, is doing the right thing. And so it resonated with me, and I think I tried to help make it resonate with the people who I met with. So now at the beginning of September, I had a meeting with the hiring manager, the VP. Thought it went well. I thought, there were aspects that that made sense to me. And one of the questions I asked at the end was, what was it on my resume that made him think I'd be a good candidate? And he had said it looked like I had done some things, built some things from scratch, which were things that he felt he needed on his team. Had that interview. I think a few days later, HR called me back saying that there'll be a panel interview with 5 people, but that was about 3 weeks later. So it was a waiting period. During this waiting period, I was still applying for jobs and having interviews with other companies along the way. So I didn't put everything in one basket, but I didn't know what to make. I didn't know what to expect. And then I had the panel interview. Everything's on Zoom. Again, I think I tried to resonate the doing the right thing with them. It wasn't an act. It was actually true. Not that we're acting in an interview, but you're trying to place the right words. Had that interview, thought it went okay. The next day, got an email from HR saying, we want to do the final round with some C-suite people and the hiring manager on Friday. And I thought this was Monday, so I thought it was that Friday. And I'm like, oh, I'm excited. Final round interview. Things are going nicely. And then I noticed it wasn't that Friday. It was the end of October. So it was like a month away. Again, waiting period. Ended up having the interview with a couple of senior executives and the hiring manager. Again, thought it went well. Doing the right thing was something that they had said, that I said that's what resonated with me. And the funny thing is the last part of the last minute of the interview, my boss's boss noticed something. And I don't know if you could see it. Okay. It was just off to the side. And if you can see it in the corner, he says, "What's that little red thing behind you?" And I was like, oh, that's Elmo. I was like, oh my God, in the middle of an interview, he's asking me about why I have a stuffed animal behind me. And then his counterpart says, oh yeah, and that's Cookie Monster next to him. So, not exactly what I would like to have come out in the middle of an interview, an important interview. I told him that those are there for my granddaughter, and usually at the end of the day, when there's time, we FaceTime, and if I'm sitting at my desk working, I could just do it from there. The good news is from there, I got a call from HR for references. I had all my references lined up. They filled it out the next day, and then I was waiting. Still didn't hear from them until Friday. And I'm waiting because I thought references means, okay, you should be getting a job offer at like any minute now, which came on Friday. I told them I need to think about it to Monday. At the end of the day, it resulted in a job offer, which I accepted at Visiting Nurse Service of New York as the Director of Workforce Management. The start date they originally asked was to be December 7th. And again, who am I to push? And then they called me back later that day and said, the hiring manager would like you to start earlier. And I ended up starting the week of Thanksgiving, which I thought that was really nice considering how thankful I am to start the week of Thanksgiving. You should know, the other thing you should know about me is I'm 58 years old. So ageism being what it is, and wasn't sure what to make of it, but I'm truly fortunate to have landed. I thank God every day. And my lessons learned from this is, you all know that looking for a job is a job. People who've spoken on this panel have said it, it's a full-time job. It's maybe the most challenging job that I've ever had, because it's the first time in my life I actually had to go look for a job. And it requires a lot of patience, optimism, roller coaster, leaning on people if you need to, on a community, whether it's a LinkedIn community or your family or your friends. The biggest takeaway I got was not to discount anything or anyone that could be a connection. I stepped way outside my comfort zone, right? I'm the huge introvert, and I reached out to someone who really, we didn't know each other. And fortunately, it was a good connection who helped me get in front of the hiring manager. So, you just never know, and don't take it for granted. And again, the people at JVS helped me through this process as well.
Can I ask you a question, Ari? I want to ask you a question, because you said something that I have not heard. You leaned on others. Just very briefly, for somebody who's an introvert, although I have to tell you, I don't think anybody on this panel would have thought you were introverted. So just so you know that, which I think is great. But how did you feel about leaning on others when you had to? If in speaking with you, that doesn't seem like you're that person who is quick to ask others. So just briefly, how did that come across to you?
It's a great question. It made me very uncomfortable. I'm a very self-sufficient guy who's very self-propelled. My wife does all the worrying for all of us. And it's just not my personality to reach out to people for help, whether it's in the workplace or in my personal life. So, but I also had developed some relationships with people on LinkedIn who are also in the job seeking community. And through their posts and my posts, we built up a rapport, and it was nice, even at times, to almost look forward to seeing something from them, or hoping they see something from me that, oh, that made my day, type of thing. And I can't give enough credit to my wife, who did not fall apart, and my boys. And again, at the end of the day, I'm just so thankful that I have landed, and it is possible. No matter how the moments where you think it's bleak, my view now would be is you have not yet met the right role.
Great, thank you. And interestingly, is that Ari was he lost his job during the pandemic, and he landed during the pandemic. Our last speaker, Lamonda, had been out for a long period of time. And so we're going to go from somebody who had the short window to somebody who had a long window. And so, Lamonda Williams, I'm going to send it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. First off, shout outs to Ronni for putting together such a badass panel. She's amazing. Thank you, Meryl, and thank you to the JVS platform for just making this community and this conversation available for us and to us. Whenever I am blessed with an opportunity to have even one person just hear my story, it humbles me, and it's such a grateful opportunity for me to share. And because of this, I'm going to tell you two things. First, I'm not going to tell you anything that we don't know, that we haven't heard, because we've all heard the same things, because again, we're in this season, in this journey together. But what I am going to do is just share my story, because sharing stories is a part of our culture. Through humanity, through the beginning of time, it's how we edify one another and build each other up. So through my journey, hopefully you'll hear something that just affirms, confirms, or just resets a button for you or triggers a thought. So please don't walk away thinking I'm about to drop some gems that we don't know, because you've heard all of this before. With that being said, my name is Lamonda, and I am a TV producer and developer. I take the content that you see on the small screen, and I work through all three phases of production: pre-production, production, post, and I bring it to life on television. I have nothing to do with fintech. I am probably the fish out of the water for this group. So hopefully you will understand a little bit of my world. I formerly worked at A&E Networks. A&E Networks has Lifetime Movies, A&E The Channel, and a little small lifestyle channel called FYI that has been flipped over to Viceland. While I was at A&E Networks, I developed made-for-television movies, those fun movies where the wives always seem to kill their husbands for no ungodly reason. I also developed in the true crime unscripted space. And then let's swing the pendulum all the way over. I also developed made for television Christmas movies, which are just so formulaic. Girl goes home for Christmas, girl sees the guy, they kiss, and then it's a wonderful Christmas, right? So I had a wonderful journey in the television development world at Lifetime at A&E. I was there for close to 6 years, and in October of 2018, huge bloodbath. The television industry, just like the film industry and most other sectors in entertainment, is being shaken up by all the disruption, by the streaming platforms, by kids who no longer want to watch television, if you will. And A&E was no different. They lost 50 jobs. My role was one of the 50. I found myself literally searching for work in an industry that was completely being disrupted. I thought of pivot roles like podcasting, because much of what podcasting is exactly what I do, which is tell stories and develop them. It's just that it's in an audio world versus on a broadcast linear world. Still very tough because I had no experience in podcasting. Long story short, I segued through close to 2 years. It was 20 months of not having full-time work, living off of my savings and trusting God, quite frankly. And true to Dina's point, and pretty much everyone here, somehow, some way, it always gets done. I was never on a street corner shaking a tin can asking for money. Every time I hit my light switch, the lights came on, and anytime I opened the refrigerator, there was light and there was food there. The provision was there. So we somehow, some way see our way through. I probably could have forsaken a couple of meals, but nevertheless, I never went hungry. But 20 months literally of not having full-time work was my experience. By the grace of God, around 4th of July holiday of this year, in a pandemic, as I am receiving pandemic pay, unemployment, the whole 9 yards, a colleague of mine that I used to work with at A&E, she reached out to me and she said, hey, I know that, you might still be out there. I'm not sure, but just in case, the production company that I'm now working for, since I'm no longer at A&E, is looking for a production assistant, an associate producer. For those who may not know, a PA or AP is like a coordinator. It's like an entry-level position. I'm a senior director. It was so below my level. And she's like, I know it's way below your pay grade, Lamonda, but hey, you told me to keep my ears and eyes open. I'm just giving you a call. I reached out to my career coach who I had just met through TGIW. And for the first time ever, I engaged a career coach, which was a shakeup to the monotony for my job search process. And I said, I just want to tell this person no, because it's so below my level. And my coach shared with me, you always entertain a conversation. Even if it's, you know, outside sweeping the street, you just entertain the conversation, because when a colleague thinks of you, you thank them for thinking of you and you say, let me give it a thought. And then you circle back around and you humbly decline the offer. Well, lucky thing that I didn't just say no thanks because it's an AP position, because when she connected me with the showrunner of this show, it ended up being the complete polar opposite. And another dynamic happened in this around the 4th of July holiday, is that I was so not engaged and so disconnected that I literally took the Zoom on my front porch in Teaneck, New Jersey, in a tank top, chilling, because I was like, I'm just gonna go through this conversation and say thanks, but no thanks. Well, because I wasn't connected, I wasn't all nervous and I wasn't freaked out, and I was able to be myself and interview wonderfully. So the opportunity was to actually run the casting process for a unscripted, dramatized crime reality series on Viacom's VH1. And I would be working with 2 associate producers, not being one of the associate producers myself. The showrunner ended up being a pretty significant showrunner based in LA, who I had the opportunity to make a relationship with and possibly work on other shows with her down the road. And it was the best opportunity ever. So to this point, I am now the co-executive producer of VH1's Untitled Redemption Project. We just got an air date, May 12th. It will be on VH1. It's a 10-episode dramatized crime series. I'm still heading up the casting process, but about a month into the job, they actually promoted me to co-executive producer, because the showrunner who hired me went to work on another project with Wanda Sykes, and they hired a new showrunner, but elevated me to co-executive and showrun the series with this new person as well. So that is my story. That's how I landed in the midst of the pandemic, although I had been out for nearly close to 2 years. The lessons, as I wrap and toss it back to Ronni. 3 things. First and foremost, networking. I know, again, I told you, I'm not going to tell you anything that we haven't heard. It is so cliche. Sometimes I want to throw up when I hear network. I promise you, you have to connect to the people that you know. Had it not been for me going to my former boss's birthday dinner celebration pre-COVID, where I saw the colleague who ended up calling me, because at that dinner, I told her, I'm out there. If you hear of anything, let me know. Fast forward 8 months later, or 9 months later, maybe even a year later, she did exactly that. I would have never had that point of contact with her if I did not go to the birthday dinner and continue connecting and networking with people that are in my circle. Second thing, consider a career coach. I have never, ever engaged a career coach. And I met one through the platform on TGIW that I just connected with. It was just a synergy unlike any other. And although I've gone through outplacement services at LHH and at the Ayers Group, this career coach was just, she was my jam. I was nervous as crap to dip into my rainy day fund and to take money that I had earmarked to survive and pay my mortgage. But I was like, invest in yourself, Lamonda. It'll have to come back. And I promise you it did. She helped negotiate. She helped me navigate the salary negotiation conversation. She helped me craft my language on how to humbly say thanks, but no thanks. She was just there every step of the way. That was a different element in my job search process that I had never engaged before. And it was really, really helpful for me. And then last but not least, the third tip simply is have an accountability group. I had 2 accountability weeklies, one-on-one with one of my dear sweethearts from the TGIW group, and I had another one with 3 other people. Those completely kept me accountable and helped me and encouraged me, in addition to the JVSs and the TGIWs and the LHHs of the world. That was very helpful. Finally, and Ronni, it's back to you. You're gonna land. This is not gonna last always. No matter if it's 20 months, 2 days, 2 weeks, 3 months, it doesn't matter. Your story is your story, your journey is your journey. You're not going to go to your grave never, ever working again. So once you realize that, because you know it, once you realize it, it's just a matter of going through the paces. And as my T-neck neighbor Ari said, until you meet the right job, it's going to come. So just breathe and be and know that God is still in control. You're going to be all right. I promise you that.
So thank you, Lamonda. And I have one major question. So when are we, for those of us who don't celebrate Hanukkah, when are we getting, don't celebrate Christmas, when are we getting the Hanukkah movie? When the girl meets the boy and everything turns out just perfect. That's just a question for the folks who have been in these channels and watching these programs.
That's a great pitch. I receive it. That's a great pitch. We're going to work on that. Let's develop it together, Ronni, okay?
You should just know, Ronni, that I saw an ad on Ion about a Hanukkah movie. So there may be something out there.
Well, you just took the thunder from me and Lamonda, Barry.
No. You gotta be inspired. You gotta do something better. It's gonna be a better movie, the 2 of you guys.
Definitely. And I think, one of the things that Lamonda really gave, she wrapped it up in terms of what it is. There are things, I think each person, before we go to, and we're going to be going to questions, I'm going to turf it back to Meryl and Sharon very shortly. And I also received some questions. So, but I think what you have learned from all of them, and as I have read the comments in the chat box, is that these are inspiring stories. Nothing came easy, and nobody is just starting out in their career. Everybody is well into their career and looking for that next role, and they have obligations, whether it's family responsibility, whether it's to the bank because there's a mortgage that has to be paid, or just for your own sanity. That's the obligation, and to have maintained it. And each of them really provided, I think, the story of what it takes. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of networking. And to know that sometimes having the accountability, and that's a question I actually did want to ask Lamonda, and I know there are questions about career coaches. I'm going to keep that separate. But given the accountability groups that you had, right before this group, I was on another group, and the person also spoke to having an accountability partner or accountability group. How much did that play into keeping you on the right track, as opposed to someone like me who could play games on the computer all day long?
It kept me honest. I will tell you, it kept me honest, because I am unlike Blanton. There's a couple of different methods, regimented, block time. I'm a creative. That's not how we flow. And again, there's no judgment or anything to anyone that works that way. Different strokes for different strokes for different folks. So my work style is very fluid and dynamic. So the accountability group helped me tremendously. The accountability group read my revised LinkedIn headline. The accountability group was like, Lamonda, you promised us in 2 weeks that we would be able to see your revised resume so we can clean it up, tweak, share some thoughts with you. When I needed to write a cover letter and get it out the door right away, I could literally call my accountability group members and say, does this make sense? Do you get it? Like, they were very instrumental to me through that process. But even more than that, here's the real currency. We're still like super tight to this day. So the relationship goes beyond the immediate need of keeping each other on the straight and narrow through this process.
Great, thank you. And so there are two questions that have been coming up that I have noticed. TGIW, just so you know, is thank goodness it's Wednesday. I started from the alums of Lehigh Harrison. I believe there's some volunteers who are presently on it. So on this call right now, or the Zoom chat, whatever this is. There's that information. So that's one. The second part to it is that I know there are a number of questions that people have been chomping to ask that have been going to Meryl and Sharon because we've been texting, and I have picked up some questions at all. So if you have not put your questions in the box, please do so. And we can start taking your questions via our hosts, Meryl and Sharon.
Lenny, why don't you start with the questions that you got, and then we'll come back to anything that we
Okay. So one of the things that I have to go back to them. One of the questions was, well, not only was what's TGIW, but I have more questions. Sorry, I apologize. Was about the cover letter. Somebody asked, what about a strong cover letter? And I think that came after Dina spoke about it, because Dina really wrote amazing letters. And I had reached out to Dina at one point during this whole process, and her letters to, and I'm going to have Dina talk to it, but Dina did write letters to heads of companies that I think, and as she will share, they reached out to her just to meet her because of how amazing her letters were. I'm sure she's not sending out letters to everybody to give you. But Dina, why don't you talk about a strong cover letter?
Yeah, sure. Well, I do like to write, but what I think, like I said, as someone who receives resumes and cover letters, I just like to, one, see someone's writing skills, and two, to see how much attention they're paying and what they know about the company and why they want to work there. So one thing you don't want to do is just regurgitate what's on your resume. You want to tell a personal story. Like, I mean, all of the speakers today did that, like telling a personal story, and it just, you know, people can identify with you and make a connection. So in some cases, I talked about the company's core values. So I'd stalk the company if I didn't already know them. I'd look at their website, and if it said, oh, here's our core values, I would relate my experience in terms of the core values. Here's how, you know, here's an accomplishment, not just theoretical, like, oh, I think this is great, but here's an accomplishment or a goal I achieved in terms of teamwork or accountability or positive attitude, you know. I would add some humor to it, depending on the company. A lot of companies I was applying to, these startups, they did have humor in their job postings. And I would put, like, one was for a dog food company, and I just adopted a dog. So I put a picture of me and my dog and talked about the dog. One was for a company that I was a regular, it was a subscription food company, and I was a member. So I just had a picture of me with the product. And, you know, like, most of those did get a response. At least a thanks, it was great to hear from you, and no, or, you know, thanks, let's meet. But I just think it's important to make that connection and to show someone, like, I read your job posting, I know who you are, and this is why you should want to talk to me.
And Lamonda, thank you. You know, and Lamonda, you had mentioned about having used a cover letter when you spoke with your accountability group. Did you find that it made a difference, or did you use your cover letters because the company asked you for a cover letter when you were sending something out?
A combination of both. It was a hybrid model. When they ask or give you the option, you submit one anyways, is my personal rule of thumb, and what I've kind of learned through different groups and different career coaching tips, if you will. And it also helps settle me. So even if they don't ask for one, it's just the thing that I've always learned to do. I'm pretty old school and traditional. And so sweet, short, and simple and to the point helps to me just kind of set the context for what you're venturing into. So
And-
I'm a fan of cover letters.
And did you do creatively since you are in the creative field?
Meaning, clarify.
Well, you know, Dina would weave a story. Her cover letters were quite fascinating. She talked about, you know, sometimes her background, what she did to engage the reader in terms of why should I even speak with this person?
Mine literally would start with a fun fact. You know, hi, my name is Lamonda. I'm a TV producer and developer. I once interned for Stevie Wonder and I fought big government and won. Here's why I'm interested in your, you know, it was just,
Right.
it was creative for the world that I work in. So again, different things work for different industries, very informal and just to the point, just to kind of set the stage.
Okay, great. And in terms of, and I'll ask this of Blanton, the question came up of when you connected with people on LinkedIn, how did you engage to get them to engage in conversation? And here's a question I'm going to ask. I've had people ask me to connect, and I too question that. So for the individual who asked that question, I will say, thank you for your invitation. Would love to touch base with you. When are you available? And don't hear anything from them. So I want to hear how, be it from Mike, be it from Blanton. I know Ari had to go to a meeting. I want to know how you folks handled. Did you send back when somebody asked you to link in and ask them to talk with you?
I guess I'll go briefly first. I had a coach who said, if someone reaches out to you, it's kind of a mix of, is it just out of the blue? Is there some logic to it? Because generally my LinkedIn network is people that I know or have met. But if it was something, I went to the TGIW group. If someone from there looked to, you know, link in, if it was a fellow job searcher, if it was someone who someone knew, I would look at their LinkedIn profiles and see who do they know who I know. And then if someone had some people who I knew, I would do it. Or if it was a recruiter, you know, I would link in. So I did it selectively. I also reached out to people and usually I would just message them. And I would say, you know, quick call on this person's suggestion. You know, I would let them know where there was a contact. I would have, you know, checked with that person first that could introduce them, but I tried to give them a name or reason to speak with me. And then I would just be very short. You know, if they would have, you know, 15 minutes and I would ask for that. And then also I responded to people's posts, especially I hadn't kept my network as alive as I might have. So I, you know, started anytime someone had a job anniversary, a birthday, they posted something. I started posting and messaging, you know, people within my network again to say hi. I also sent out holiday greetings. You know, this is a perfect time to do it. And then if someone replies, I would say, hey, you know, I'd love to catch up. Would you have 15 minutes in the coming week? And then just kind of follow up with the people who seemed receptive. So it was kind of a mix, but trying to personalize it. And again, to focus on them, just like we focus on the companies and a cover letter, if we're reaching out to LinkedIn, you know, focus that we're interested in them.
Great, thank you. And Michael, what did you do regarding people asking you or trying to reach out to people via LinkedIn and connecting?
I mean, excuse me? No, I mean, I kind of welcome it. So whenever people, you know, I kind of make sure to see who they are, but if there any remote connection, you get a lot of solicitors, I'd say, so to speak, those I don't entertain. But anyone else who kind of try to reach out, you know, I definitely, if they want to just connect, or if they want to have a subsequent conversation, I'm open to that as well.
Okay.
Ronnie, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because I see some people are starting to drop off. Don't disappear. We have tons of time left, and we know there are a lot of you there who have been putting in questions that we want to get back to. But any of those of you who are familiar with our programs and those of you aren't, we are going to now post into the chat box. I'm going to a link to an evaluation. It is crucial that this evaluation is not only completed, but really completed completely. We use this both to give feedback to our speakers, and even here, even those volunteer panelists, give them some feedback on their presentations. Also, it helps us figure out what programs we want to do next. And lastly, it helps us tell our funders here, this is what people think of our programming, give us more money so we can keep doing this. So Sharon is gonna watch the clock for 3 minutes and just click on that link or cut and paste it. It will take you straight to the Google form and fill it out. And please, please, please do it so that we have this information. So the time
is what keeps us going. And we are career coaches, as you're talking about, and we're doing it for a really minimal amount of money because of these wonderful funders, but they want to see that you guys are here. So this helps us with that.
Okay, so go do it, and we'll be staying here for 3 minutes.
For those of you who are familiar, it's like the Yom Kippur pledge that you get in Kol Nidre. So for those of you who are not familiar, but once a year, there's always a little note on your chair when you go for the religious holidays. They're asking for money from your synagogue. This place is not asking for your synagogue, it's just asking for your feedback. And to be fair, so if any of you don't realize, JVS is non-denominational in terms of their help to other people. So we kid around, but just want to make sure that you're aware of that. Three minutes up yet?
Nope, I will tell you. We're at 1:48. Fifteen seconds, everyone. Okie dokie.
And for any of you who have not completed it, you can go back and fill it out later, but please do that because we really need your help. Okay, back to you, Ronnie, and your questions, and then we'll see what other questions we have.
Great. So one of the questions that was asked is, how did you address the fact that you had been out for a significant period of time when it came up? Because you were out pre-pandemic, and even though you landed during the pandemic. Did the question come up? And if so, how did you address it? And I'll turn it to all four of you, sorry.
I'm happy to address it. I addressed it head on, and I thought about it in advance so that I had my answer. And I said that my mother broke her hip and I went down to New Orleans to take care of her, which was all true. But that really, people, you know, they got it. They accepted that. I said, I started doing financial literacy courses as a as a volunteer. I talked about that. I did some consulting. I spoke at that. And I talked about also things that I did in the industry in the midst of the job search so that I could demonstrate that I was staying in touch with the industry and with colleagues in it. And I got a complete pass, you know, in terms of, you know, the family care, like everyone got it. It's like, oh, sure, of course. So if you have any things you need to take care of, I'd encourage you to mention them because they, you know, everyone has them.
And Lamonda, you were out for a while. How did you deal with it? Or is that an industry, something within the industry that's known that, you know, sometimes people are going to be out for a significant period?
Well, through my outplacement service time at the Ayers Group, I was concerned about that, but they shared with me that as long as you are upskilling, or again, if you're volunteering or just doing something, you can always overcome that question in interviews. That's really where it matters. People looking on LinkedIn, not so much. And so I did exactly that. You know, to Blanton's point, I upskilled. I took a podcasting production class over in Brooklyn. I started speaking. I started taking conversational Spanish classes. I put that on my resume, and it became a talking point whenever I did engage with the hiring recruiter. But most importantly, what happened was the biggest reason why I think I am even here, and something that I was supposed to do all along, which is I had my father's gravesite moved from a segregated cemetery, civilian cemetery in Florida, 41 years after he was shot and killed in action in the Vietnam War. And after being denied by the government to have him reinterred at Arlington National Cemetery, I was able to finally overcome the government's no on a plea and petitioning them to take a look at how incredibly dire the cemetery that he was buried in was abandoned, pretty much a poor man's grave. And they accepted him, and he was buried in August of 2019 with full military honors. And it was a huge journey for me. And although, thank you. And so I just shared with employers, again, much to Blanton's point, like I took the time, the close to 2 years to upskill, shore up on some things that I wanted to enhance my career and to accomplish the biggest project that I could ever imagine, my personal Mount Everest, which was having my father, the war hero that he was, receive his due respect and honor 41 years later.
That's great.
Just tell your truth and be authentic. Again, my career coach always, just own it. Just own it. It is what it is. We are not the only individuals that have not worked for 3 years, 4 years, 2 months. Like, just own it and be your true authentic self. And people will either go with that or not.
And what I think is amazing, Lamonda, is that you went from New Jersey to Brooklyn. So that in and of itself, the fact that anybody who knows, you know, we in New York City do not go from one borough to another. So to go from New Jersey to Brooklyn, kudos on two things, not only your dad, but you went over the bridge. So I'll give you that major thumbs up. I want to ask about thank you notes. Has anybody never written a was there ever a time that you did not write a thank you note on any interview or any network interview? And if you did not write it, why not?
I always write it. I mean, I do hiring now, and you know, I kind of not really the words that are there, but the fact that someone took the time to send one means a lot, as opposed to not. I mean, well, you know, obviously my time was invaluable, or you know, you don't really think you want that position as much. So I wrote one each time. You know, I had a template, and then I would gear it toward that specific conversation, but always sent one.
Great. How's everybody else? How do you view the thank you notes?
Ronnie, can I say something? It's Sharon.
Sure.
I like to call my thank you letters a persuasion letter. A lot of you probably have heard about this, because it's your opportunity to go back and say something, that you might have forgotten. Like often we're, you get out of the interview and go, oh my goodness, you know, I'm Neil Armstrong and I walked on the moon, and I forgot to say that because it was so many years ago. So you can use that thank you letter. You start with thank you, and then you go into it. You know, I'm so happy for this opportunity. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm so thankful for this opportunity. And I also want to let you know that I walked on the moon in 1964. And I think that that might also be something that's important for you to know about me. So you can use that thank you letter if you keep it short as what you forgot to tell them, or letting people know that you heard them. Like people want to know they've been heard. So you say, in the interview, I heard you when you said the most important thing is teamwork. And I can promise you that if you hire me, I will be a great team player and do all the things that you want me to. So it's such an important thing, the thank you letter. It's not just thank you for your time. It's a way to do lots of other things that you've either forgotten or want to emphasize.
And I will tell you, and Michael knows about this, but I once came back from an interview and I said in our job work team, and Michael has never let me forget this, but I said, what happens if you do an interview and it has absolutely no redeeming qualities? There's nothing positive about the reason I would even want to consider either moving forward or being a part of the organization. And I want you to know they really liked me. And there was one thing that that was like the stopper on the whole thing. But ironically, I had to send the thank you note and to reiterate why I would want to work for them, because you know what, I really wanted to continue on with the process. But it was for anybody who does labor relations, when you're dealing with you'd have 25 labor contracts that you have to negotiate. And there were already about, I forget how many grievances were on the table. There was nothing redeeming about the role. So, but you still do it. And I just really believe in it. And also, I will tell you, as a hiring manager, similar to what Michael said, we notice it. It's our time and we've spent the time with you. So just to that point.
One other thing I'll jump in is that if you feel you didn't do well or didn't say something that you wish that you had, it was a prior job search, but there was a 2-on-1 interview with me and they asked a question which I felt I'd flubbed. And I talked to a friend and I wrote in the thank you letter, I said, you know, you asked a very important question and my answer didn't go far enough. And then I briefly put in some key things and I went forward and got an offer with that firm. So, you know, if you blew it, you think, try anyway. What do you have to lose? And then it also gave me confidence that if I did make a mistake, I could recover from it.
And just to follow up on what you said, Blanton, I had a client once who also went into a first interview and blew it and didn't make it to round 2. And she wrote a follow-up letter to the person just saying, you know, I realized I blew it. I understand why I didn't go forward. It was her dream company to work for. In the meantime, she said, I'll keep in touch. She went on and got another position that lasted about 6 weeks and was really not a good fit. We always hear not a good fit. This was really not a good fit. Went back to the original company and the person she had thanked and said, I blew it, I'm sorry. And just said, I'm out of work again if anything comes up. And at the end, not only did they hire her, what they told her was one of the reasons they brought her back was they were so impressed by how she handled the rejection. So you never know and you never cut a bridge because it could always lead to something.
Another question that has come up is, how do you deal with the people who ask you while you're in search, because you don't know that you're out of work right now, but when people would come up to you and say, so what are you up to? How's the search going? Whether it be your family or your friends, all who are well-meaning, or people who would say, oh, you're still out? How come? Dina, I'm going to go to you on that one as the HR person. But that's the question that does come up from folks. And I know your network, how do you deal with the people who are, I'm going to say, the person who asked the question didn't ask it, but I'm going to say that they were well-meaning. I'm sure everybody was well-meaning. They're really concerned, but why didn't you get that job? Well,
did
what-
experience that. Yeah, I did experience that with mostly with family too and close friends, just like reaching out. How's it going? No, nobody was like, why didn't you get it? I think a lot of people, really empathize and understand there's more and more people in this position. I kept it short. I got tired of hearing myself talk about the job search. Again, that keeping our mental health positive. I just couldn't keep rehashing it, but I would be gracious, and say, thanks so much. It's going well, or I'm still, still going, ups and downs. But in terms of anyone like in an interview that asked, why are you still, or why is your search taking so long? I just said, I'm being really particular. Like, I'm at a place in my career. I'm not looking for just any job. I have these requirements that I'm looking for in a career. And so I'm making sure that I find the right fit.
And I'm going to pop in on this one. I'm a pot sticker. The only reason I ever find myself out is my company gets sold or there's a merger. Other than that, once you get me, you got me. It's like a bad rash. It just doesn't go away. So I would say to you that, I always take it that people are well-meaning. I don't know, but Michael, Lamonda, how do you feel about that when people would ask the question? I mean, Michael, you have, again, I don't keep me, but I know that you've got little ones, or I don't know how little they are, but how do you deal with that, knowing that you had that other responsibility?
I think some people would just check in, more closer friends would check in from time to time, and you'd kind of have a conversation about it. But, it does get old after a while, right? It's kind of, or more like my parents would ask me, my mom would ask me, like kind of just kind of kick it to the curb more, because she's probably more of like, what are they going to do? Oh my God, he has no job. So more from a concern aspect. So I think it depends on who it was, but it wasn't a secret, right? You just kind of addressed it. Hey, it's going, it's not easy time right now, and I would just kind of keep on going, but just kind of it's not going to get too down about it, but would address it.
Okay.
Same here. Just very briefly, when people ask, it's really a code for them. When personal people ask, this is how I perceived it. When family, friends, colleagues would ask, they're asking just to check in on you. And so my answer would be from still moving forward, still in this season of job search and moving it along, but I'm doing well. And when potential employers would ask, it was basically them saying, tell me something about yourself and sell yourself again. They're not really asking you how things are going. They're asking you for you to tell them why they should consider you for this role. Okay. So in my humble opinion, if you separate the two and think about it like that, you'll be fine. And it's just a season. So the season lasts for different time periods for different people.
Right. Question came up was, what do you do if the thank you note, I'm going to go back to the thank you note. If the thank you note comes to you from the person you interviewed for, and ironically, that did happen to me, where somebody thanked me before I had the chance and said, it was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you and good luck in your endeavors. And mind you, this was my 7th interview, and that was that was a person who was going to be a business partner. So how did I sort of, for me, I just sent another note to the person that kind of said, thank you, you beat me to the punch. I'm so thrilled that I had the chance to meet with you, etc. Did that happen to anybody where they got a thank you note from the person with whom they interviewed? Anyway, okay, so.
All right, Ronnie, before you ask another question, because I see lots of people are dropping off, okay, and I want as many people in the call, but don't go anywhere because we got until you guys are done. We're happy to have more questions. But I really want to thank Dina and Blanton and Michael and Ari, who had to drop off, and Lamonda, and especially Ronnie for putting this together. So how about a virtual hand of applause for all of our participants, for your honesty, for your transparency, for your great advice. And I know that Lamonda said, oh, you've heard all this before, but you know what? When it comes from someone who's been through it, then it really makes more of a difference. And especially since all of you have been so honest and really forthcoming on what you went through. Just a preview. So usually we'd be meeting again in 2 weeks, but it's New Year's Eve and we're all going to be out there partying in the snow, although it's sunny outside now. So yay for Northern New Jersey. And so we are not going to have the program on New Year's Eve. We will have to skip a week and our next program will be January 7th. And I have snatched a great presenter who not only has podcasts and everything else, but she's terrific. And she's going to do some version of networking, but with lots of hands-on. So anybody who's on this call, your name, your email address, if you registered, will only be going into a file that is for getting you information for our next calls. And just to say again that JVS is here. If anybody wants more information, you can email me, first initial M, last name Kanner. I'll put it in the chat again and the YouTube video thing in the chat again at jvsnj.org. Make sure you include a phone number so I can call you back. Give me some time because I am back to back with appointments all day long, but I try to get the calls in whenever I can. And this has just been terrific. So Ronni, again, thank you so much for putting all this together. All the people who've been here all morning have volunteered their time and they all work. So they gave up of their work time to come be here. And Sharon, my colleague, Sharon Stern, my co-counselor, and I just want to thank you for doing this. And now Ronni, back to the questions.
So we're going to go back to that LinkedIn and the referral. If you did not get responses to people who you reached out to link into, or to garner a referral from somebody for a role, how many times did you take a go at it? How many times did you go for that, take that stab to get somebody to talk with you about a particular role? Now, Mike, you're at JP Morgan, or, did you see something in, let's say, I'll use it, a different bank or a different financial services that you were trying for them to connect with them? Did you find that there was a time that you reached out to people when they just were not responsive? And if so, how many times did you reach out to them?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned earlier, I kind of used any holiday or any reason to kind of get back to them. Sometimes I wouldn't hear back and sometimes I would. And when you didn't, it takes sometimes take them a week to get back, right? And so then I would send an email and say, hey, not sure, know you're busy and not sure if you saw this, but, blah, 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 blah. So I kind of tried to reach out, especially with JP Morgan, because it did go 3 interviews and I was kind of open, it just kind of got held up because of the pandemic. But yeah, I reached out as much as I could to either the recruiter and to the hiring manager. I reached out to both. I would kind of ping them separately. So I definitely did try to, kind of keep the lines of communication open because, right, I think my eggs were in that basket pretty much. So I didn't want it to run dry, and I, wanted to continue to express how interested I was in the position and how much, how much I was looking forward to potentially working there.
Okay, I'm going to ask one final question. If you could do, because Dina also had to drop off. There was a couple questions that were directed to her, and I will connect to her and then, try to reach back to Meryl and Sharon about it. But if you had anything to do over on this whole journey that you got to take, and this whole road that you didn't want to drive or walk down, and at any point during the period of time, whether it was 8 months or 18 months, is there anything you would have done different in the job search? Blanton, I'll start off with you since you started the whole program off.
And I think part of it's speaking partly to Lamonda's thing, to really trust that I will work. I said that to myself many times, but I didn't fully believe it. And I let an element of fear come inside me. I don't know that I projected it, but there was, that if we can really trust in ourselves, and for me, to relax with it, which I did it at times. But I think, to really say there will be a next step. There are things to do, whether it's part-time, whatever. And to try to believe that. And I talked to friends who were supportive, that was really key because my internal head, wasn't always as positive. And I think I was able to put a positive air out there, but I made it harder for myself than I might have.
Okay. And Mike, what about you?
Well, I mean, I think I knew that my end date was coming. I probably took it for granted that I had so much time. If I had to look back, I would probably have started my job search earlier, not knowing it'd be this difficult. So, I mean, I give everyone a lot of credit on this call. I know it just persevere, right? I mean, everyone's been doing it. Like I said, you know, some people are short, some people long. You know, mine was a little over a year, but it's kind of continue persevering. And as Blanton said, you know, everybody will land even during a pandemic, and hopefully we're at the, you know, getting over the hump, and things will start to get better, and even from an economic standpoint, and for each person on this call. So I would say, kind of circling back, you know, maybe started my search earlier, and maybe taking a little bit more seriously, knowing how difficult it is.
Okay. And Lamonda.
I would have hired my career coach much earlier in the game. Hands down, it was the point of differentiation for me in this season of job search versus the last time. Well worth the investment.
Okay. I want to thank everybody, and I want to leave people with a note. You know, we are in a season of holidays, and it's, you know, this is sort of a tough time, you know, especially this year. We are not seeing our families. You know, I think my sister may be on this call, but that's how I see my sister. I haven't seen her in person in nearly a year. I haven't seen my brother-in-law more than a year because of the pandemic, and that's my family, my immediate family. You know, it's a tough time, and then you're in job search mode, and you're dealing with a lot of other things. But the one thing you have to stay throughout this period, and I can tell you, I know Lamonda, I knew all the panelists, absent Ari, and he and I had a conversation to speak. But the fact is that everybody said the same thing to me during the whole time. Not they didn't say something. It's what I knew of them, and it's the reason I asked them to be part of the panel. There's one other person who's on the panel, but we were only using 5, and everybody agreed to be a part of the panel. Here's the thing: you need to be positive. You know, you never know who you're going to meet, when you're going to meet them, where you're going to meet them. You could be on the line to get, you know, to be food shopping. You could be online at, you know, the drugstore. Somebody may hear you speaking with somebody else. And wherever you go and whatever you do, you need to remain positive. And if you're going to fall apart, and some of us, we've done it, we're there, and you know who you could lean on and to whom you lean into. But the thing is that ultimately somebody like Lamonda, and I'm going to share this with you, is when I went on to one of the networking groups, I know people would be shocked, but I was very quiet early on. Whenever I'm on a networking group, I'm very quiet. And bottom line was, she sent a note in the chat of she liked the glasses I had on it. And it had to be in the midst of the pandemic because I wore my glasses all the time. I can't tell you what that did for me to bring me up, because I was really down during the pandemic. You're in an 850 square foot apartment. You're not going to be really positive if this is where you are. My point is that positive, positive, positive. That I can't say we are all going to land. You hear the stories from people who were out, whether it was from 8 months or actually from 5 months to 18 months. Listen, it's not a fun time. I'm not going to tell you it is. It's a tough time. We're going through things. We have bills to pay, and we're not just getting our jobs on our looks, but we are going to land. And to Meryl and to Sharon, I thank you very much for letting me put the program together. I know you had asked me to put a program together, and I hope this has been worth everybody's
It's
time.
been amazing. And one of the reasons Ronni has been on a lot of our calls before that, and Sharon and I said, Ronni has such great advice. She must be able to put together a program for us. So again, I know you all got to go, and I just want to wish you all happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate or don't celebrate. Enjoy the snow if you want to, enjoy the shoveling if you don't want to, but just stay healthy, stay safe, stay warm, and hopefully maybe I won't see you on January 7th because you landed. So
Only wishing for a good new year, because next year it's going to be
a great year because it's got
that 2020. It's behind us. So only good things, everybody. Thank you.
Stay healthy. Take care.
Bye.